In this video, you're going to learn about React component props, which are at the very core of allowing our components to communicate with one another. So let's take header, for example. Header is currently completely static. Every time we create an instance of it, we're going to get the exact same thing rendered to the screen. That makes header not reusable. We obviously don't want to show the exact same thing for all pages in our application. I might want to, for example, customize the title on each page. On the About page, I want to show About. On the Help page, I want to show Help. In order to do that, what we're going to do is pass data in when we initialize an instance of our components. That data, it's known as props. Setting up component props is very similar to setting up HTML attributes. For example, ID, class name, any of the ones we use in our markup, those go right here as key value pairs. The key being ID, and we set it equal to some value, like app. What we're going to be doing, though, is setting up these key value pairs for our header, action, options, add option, or any other component we happen to have. So when we're defining an instance of one of our components, we can optionally choose to pass in some key value pairs. Now, the key can be anything we like, so I can just arbitrarily make something up like title, and I can pass that value in. In our case, we're going to set the value equal to a string. Let's go ahead and use test value just to make sure it's actually showing up. We'll render something different so it's easy to see it change. Now at this point, we have passed some data into header. We've passed in a single prop called title, whose value is the string test value. The question is, how do we get access to that? Well, inside of our components, we know we have access to this. We saw this inside of the ES6 class videos. Inside of your components, this works much the same way. It is a reference to the current instance of this component, and React gives us access to our props on an object that is this dot props. Before we go ahead and do anything else, let's just dump this to the screen. I'm going to wrap it in parentheses and call console.log. We can go ahead and save app.js and take a look at the object that prints. Down below, what do we get? We get title equals test value right here. So it takes this, some HTML attribute looking thing, and it converts it over into an object key value pairs. Now we can go ahead and actually use the title prop. It's just a string, which means we can use it like we've used any other string inside of our JSX right here. Inside of a JavaScript expression, this .props.title. Now we're taking that title value from up above, we are actually using it, and the end result is test value rendering to the screen. And there we have it. We just created our very first component prop. We can go ahead and switch this over to anything we like. We could also reference a variable defined elsewhere. Let's go ahead and do that. Right here, inside of render before my return statement, I'm going to set up a const title, and I'll set it equal to the title I'd like to use. Indecision is going to be my title. Now, instead of defining a static string in line, we can just set up our JavaScript expression like we've done for onClick handlers and our ID attribute previously in the course. Right here, we just reference the thing we want to pass down. It could be a function, object, Boolean, string, undefined, number, anything you want. In our case, it's just a string title. Now that we have this passed down, we can go ahead and use it. We're already using it. If we save the file, we should once again see indecision showing up, and that is exactly what we get. Let's go ahead and remove the console.log right here and add on a second one. This is going to be for the subtitle. So we can set up a new const. We can call that one subtitle. We can set it equal to whatever string we want. In our case, we're going to use the exact same text right here. We can cut it out and paste it in. Now by doing this, we're still going to end up with the same result. We're just creating a much more flexible header component. We can have that data provided right on the fly, right here. We're going to set up subtitle. Where do we want to get that value from? We already have a variable, so we'll just use a JavaScript expression to reference that variable, subtitle. Now we have access to that prop down below on this.props. This.props is now an object with two properties, title and subtitle. We already used title. Let's use subtitle right here. This.props.subtitle. Excellent. Now that we have this in place, let's save app.js. We get the exact same result, but this result is indeed coming from this string. So if I were to tweak the string, we would see those tweaks showing up as I save the file. Now we have a header component that can be used anywhere we want inside of the application. We can use the exact same structure, event handlers, and all that sort of stuff without needing to rewrite any of that code. Now that we have the easy ones done, title and subtitle, let's take a look at something a little more complex. Over here, we have title and subtitle. We already knocked those out. But what about options? Arguably the only meaningful thing we track in this application. How do we take that options data and move it throughout our component tree? For now, what we're going to do is we're going to create a constant options right here. And this options array is going to change over time. We're going to worry about events in a little bit. For now, let's just set up some static data. 3 things that we can get rendered to the screen. Thing 1, next up, thing 2, and we're just going to add one more string, thing 4. Now that we have these 3 guys, the goal is to pass them around. We want to take all of the options and get them into the options component. The options component is concerned with rendering the individual option. That means we're going to pass them into here, and down here, we're going to dynamically generate a certain number of these, passing in a prop of its own. That's going to allow option to render the actual option text as opposed to the static text. Now, step 1 is going to be to set up an options prop on options, and down below, what we're going to do is just dump the length to the screen. The length is currently 3. That's going to allow us to make sure that the data is actually getting passed down correctly. And this is going to be your challenge for the video. So right here, step number 1 is to set up an options prop for the options component. And we already know what data we're going to use. We're just going to use the array we created. Then down inside of options, you are going to render the length of the array. So in this case, you can just access the length property, dumping the number 3 to the screen. And as the length of the array changes, the application will re-render showing that new length. So take a few minutes to knock this one out, pass the data into options, use that data to render the total length. When you're done, test your work. Then you can go ahead and click play. All right, let's go ahead and knock that one out. Up above, what are we going to do? We're just going to pass options into the options component right here, setting options equal to whatever we like. In our case, we are going to reference the variable we just defined, options. Now we have access to this array on this.props.options down below. We're going to use that to get the length, and we're going to dump that length to the screen. I didn't give you a specific format for that, so we can just go ahead and put it right here. This.props is our object. On there, we have access to options. Options is an array, which means we have access to length. If we go ahead and save our application, we should see 3 showing up, and that is exactly what we're getting. So at this point, all of the array data, it is correctly getting passed into options. So what's the next goal? The next goal is to create a new instance of option for each item in the array. Let's just forget that the option component even exists for now and take things step by step. What we're going to do is actually remove it from being rendered at all. Now, instead of dumping the length to the screen, what I want you to do as your second challenge is to create a new paragraph tag for each item in the options array. You're going to set that paragraph tag text equal to the individual option text, and you're going to set that paragraph tag key equal to the option key. We did the exact same thing over here, except instead of being a paragraph tag, it is a list item. So take some time to knock that one out. I'll leave a quick comment right here. Render new p tag for each option, and then you're going to set the text, and you're going to set the key. How do you know you completed it successfully? Well, you're going to see all 3 items showing up in paragraph tags, thing 1, thing 2, and thing 4, and you're not going to see any warnings down below. You can go ahead and delete the length. We no longer need that. Right here, you're going to type your code. Take some time to knock that out, get that paragraph tag showing up, and when you're done, test your work, then click play. All right, this is something we've done before. We're going to access the array. That is this.props.options. From here, we're going to use map. We're going to take our array of strings and convert it into an array of paragraph tags. We're going to set up map to take the function we know it takes, and we're just going to use an arrow function, and we'll use the shorthand syntax. So we get our argument passed in. It's the individual item in the array. It is the text. and we're going to go ahead and implicitly return our paragraph tag. No need to break it out into curly braces and define a return statement. Now, what do we want to do in this paragraph tag? We want to set the text and the key. Both are pretty easy. We've done them before. The text goes right here inside of a JavaScript expression option, and same is true with the key. We're going to set the key equal to, and we're going to reference option. Now that is it for the challenge. We can go ahead and remove the comments. We can save the file, and over in the browser, we see thing 1, thing 2, and thing 4 showing up. That was all you had to do for the challenge, but we're going to take this one step further. Instead of rendering a new paragraph tag, we're going to render an instance of option. How are we going to do that? What we're going to do is implicitly return an instance of option like we've been doing for all of our components. We create it with this code. Now, what do we want to do? Well, we still want to pass in the key prop. If we're creating an array of JSX, we have to define a key on each, whether it's a regular element like a list item or a paragraph tag, or a custom component like option. That means we're going to set up key just like we had it, and we are going to set key equal to the option. Now we can focus on the interesting stuff, which is actually passing in a prop. The key isn't going to be available down below. This is a special reserved name. What we're going to do is set up one called option text, and we're going to set that equal to the same value, option. Now we're going to have access to that individual option down below. We're going to be able to render that as opposed to rendering this static text. Let's go ahead and knock that out by adding in a JavaScript expression where we access the prop we just set up. This .props.option text. If I go ahead and save the file, we're going to get the exact same thing showing up. We switched from a paragraph tag over to a div, which is why the spacing looks a little bit different. We're going to ignore all styles for now. We'll focus on that later. The real goal is that everything is indeed showing up. This gives us a ton of flexibility. If we want to tweak what an option looks like, we can tweak it in one place. I could put option : space right here, save the application, and it shows up for all of our options, creating components that are super flexible and super reusable. That's it for this one. Let's take a quick moment to recap what we learned in this video. We learned that when we create instances of React components, we can also choose to pass some data into it. That data looks very much like HTML attributes, but it's really just a set of key value pairs, where the key is always some sort of string and the value can be anything we like, whether it's a string, array, number, or any other type in JavaScript. When we pass data into a component, we can use that data inside of the component itself. In this case, we pass in a title and subtitle, and we use that information to correctly render header. All of your props are available on this .props. Now, what does this give us? Well, this gives us a way to set up one-way communication. So for example, Indecision app can communicate some information with these four guys, and options can communicate some information with option. Down at the very bottom of the file, we could also pass some props in here. This creates one-way communication. Later in the section, we'll look at how we can reverse that. For example, when someone submits the add option form, we want to go ahead and actually add that option onto the array. How are we going to do that? Well, we're going to figure all of that out in the next video. We're going to start by figuring out how we can set up event handlers inside of our class-based components. I'm excited to get to it. I'll see you next time.